Okay, we are back with another tutorial video. For this one, we are going to create our first program in Python. So you'll see that I'm here at Repl.it, and what I'm going to do is log in to Repl.it. If you don't have a Repl.it account yet, go ahead and click sign up. Make sure you sign up with Google, and then choose either your school Gmail account or a personal Gmail account, whichever works better for you. I already have an account, so I'll just log in here. And we're going to come up here to this button right here that says New REPL. And so this, before we do that, this website is an online compiler. So what it does is it lets you enter code, and then it'll compile the code and then run it for you. So this is a great way to just write programs, or at least work online without having to save your programming files to your computer or to your Chromebook. So pretty cool website. So a couple of quick ways to make a new file. And in Repl.it, these are called REPLs. So you can choose this button here. If you wanted to, you can click New REPL. You can also click this plus button here. And since we'll be using Python, you can also click this button here. So I'll just use this one. And I want to choose Python. And we're going to call this program the letter grade program, like that. And then we're going to click create REPL. And this is what the REPL looks like. So on the left side, you will have the files that you have open. For us, we're not really going to worry about this yet, so I can actually click that button to close it. And on the left side is where I'm going to enter my code. On the right side is my console. So this will print out any messages that we want to print out so we can see what our program is doing. And so our goal here is to create a letter grade program. So you'll notice I put a hashtag right here, and you'll see that the hashtag turns green. This is where we can enter notes. So these are just things that we can type in to remind us what we're doing, or maybe to explain what a block of code does. So I can use those green or these hashtags to enter notes. So this is called the letter grade program. And what the letter grade program is going to do, we are going to input. So the program will ask for input from the user, and it's going to ask for a name, a class, and a grade percentage. And then what's going to happen is the program will output, the program will output the letter grade that the user has in that class. That's just the gist. So a pretty basic program. And a couple of the things that we're going to be using in this program. So we will need to use loops or iteration. And we're also going to need to use selection. So things like if then else statements. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to ask the user for some input. The way I do that is I type this keyword here. It's called input. And this is very similar to the ask block in Scratch. And I'm going to say first, I'm going to say, please, I'll just say something like this. Hello, what's your name? Question mark. And then I'm going to put a space after the question mark, but inside the quotation marks. So just to see what this looks like, I'm going to run this. And you're going to see that it prints out this statement, which is what's inside the quotation marks. And I could type in a name. So you can see that I can enter something. Now with Python at the moment, once I've run that program, what I typed in is not being saved anywhere. So what I want to do is save the user's input to a variable. And so I'm just going to call this variable name. And I'm going to say name equals, and then I'm asking for this input here. So now if I type it in, and I type in name, name has just been saved to this variable right there. And if you remember, right here with this little input command, this input defaults to a string, which means what I type in is going to be a string in Python, which means it's not going to be a number, it's not going to be a decimal number or list, it's going to be just a string, which is basically like words, letters, sentences, things like that. Essentially, I can't do math with it. So I've got my name. The second thing I want to do is I want to ask for the class that the student is checking their grade for. So I'll type class. Now you'll notice that class turns blue here. That means it's a keyword for something else, so we can't use that as a variable. So I'm just going to call it user class like this. I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to say input again, and I'm going to say, what class are you checking your grade for? And again, this is a string because the name of a class should be a string. It's not really a number or anything else like that. So I can just leave the input statement there. And just one thing you'll notice, if you see where my cursor is right here in the console, if I come over here and take away the space in between the quotation mark and the question mark, and I run my code, you'll see that it's kind of jammed up against the side there, or jammed up against the question mark. So that's why I put a space in there. Python doesn't care really about white space. So if I were to put spaces here like this, you won't see any difference because Python doesn't care about this type of white space. It also doesn't care about, for example, space here. Can't have a period there though, but it doesn't care about space there either. Where it does care about space is inside the quotation marks. You will see these things inside quotation marks. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so the third thing I want to ask the user for is I want to ask them for the percentage that they have in their class. So I might just call this %. That'll be the name of my variable. And I'm going to say input, what's your grade percentage for? Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to concatenate this string with my variable user class. And the reason I'm doing that is I just want to ask the user, what's your grade percentage for, and then that's going to print whatever class they just typed in above. So I'll show you what this looks like, and then I'll put a question mark there. And remember, using these plus operators is just like using the join block in Scratch. I'm concatenating things together. So let's take a look, see what this looks like. Hello, what's your name? We'll say Tommy. What class are you checking this grade for? We'll say math. And then it says, what's your grade percentage for math? And notice I didn't put a space there, so I'm just gonna add a space just like that. So far so good. So we're getting some information from the user. We've got their name, we've got their class, and we've got the percent that they have in the class. Now the next part of my program, this is where I'm going to check the input. So I'm going to check this percentage that the user typed in, and I want to see if this percentage falls within the range of an A or a B or a C or a D or an F. And so this is how I do it. I'm going to use some selection here. And what I want to type is the if keyword right there. You'll see it turn blue. And I want to know, so let me just make a note here. this is where I'm going to check for A's. And I know that the range for an A is going to be between 100 and 90. So I'm going to say if the percent is, I'll say greater than or equal to 90, and the percent is less than or equal to 100. So this is going to catch every number inside of this range. So it'll be anything bigger or equal to 90 and anything less than or equal to 100. And I use the AND Boolean because I want the number has to be within this range. It has to both be greater than or equal to 90, and it's got to be less than or equal to 90. And to finish this off, I need to use a colon right there. And a colon tells Python that I'm using an if statement. And you'll notice when I hit enter, you'll see that it's tabbed me in. If you don't tab after a colon like this, you will get an error. And that's because Python doesn't know what you're trying to do. It doesn't read code that's in line with the if statement and when there's a colon there. So it doesn't know what's happening. So what I want to do is I want to say if the grade is in the range for an A, I just want to print out something like this. You have an A in, and then I'm going to concatenate user class again. So you have an A in whatever the class is, and then I'm going to put maybe an exclamation point. And I don't need to have a space here because I'm not, notice how I'm using a print command. I don't need to enter anything here, so I don't need a space after the exclamation point. Now, another way you can write this, and actually before we do that, let's just test this real quick. Type Joe, what class are you checking your grade for? We'll say math, we'll say 89, hit enter. Now you'll notice I got an error here, and it said we've got a type error. And it says that we're not supported between instances of string, str, and int. So one thing, and if you remember, I mentioned that input automatically defaults to strings. And if we're entering a number here, we don't want it to be a string because Python can't compare. Python can't tell if a string is greater than or equal to a number. So it would be like, is the word apple greater than or equal to 90? We can't really do that. So I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna put a wrapper around my input. And the wrapper that I'm gonna use is something called float. And float basically means a decimal number in Python. So we choose to use decimal numbers because most of the time percentages in classes tend to be decimal numbers. They're not really whole numbers. So we've now told Python that percent is actually a float number and not a string. So let's test this out. And again, math. What percentage? We'll say 89.4. Cool. Okay, and so nothing has happened. I typed in 89.4. That's not in our range down here that we've typed in so far. So let's find a range that is in fact represented in our code. So math again, we'll say we got a 92.6. It says, great, you have an A in math. Okay, so there's actually another way that we can write this statement right here. And you can do it this way. I actually like doing it this way because it's very clear to me, but what you can also do is write it in this way. So we can start with our lower range, which is 90. And we're gonna say 90 is less than or equal to percent, which is also the same as saying that percent is greater than or equal to 90. And percent is also less than or equal to 100. So you can write it in this way as well. And so if I test that out real quick, and we'll say 94.9%, and it'll say that you have an A. So you can write it more than one way. Okay, so we've got our A's checked for. So now I want to look for the B's. So right here, I'm going to check for B's. Now, so the if statement is saying, first, check to see if this condition is met. For B's, I want to say elif, and this is just short for else if. So if this condition is not true, we want to see if this one is true. So we're going to say else if percent is less than, and now one thing here, I'm just going to do something real quick. So I'm going to say less than or equal to 89, and percent is greater than or equal to 80. And if that's the case, I'm just going to copy this line of code right here. And instead, I'm just going to change that to a B. Oops. So notice right here, so I say else if percent is less than or equal to 89, and the percent is greater than or equal to 80. So this would be the range for B's, right, between 80 and 89. So let's test this out real quick. Let's say I have an 89.4. You're going to see that it doesn't print anything out, and that's because 89.4 is not within this range, because 89.4 is not less than or equal to 89. So what I actually need to do is take away the equal sign, and I'm just going to say 90, because this will cover any number that is smaller than 89. All right, so let's test that out there. Let's see, 89.9999, and it says you have a B. Now it will register, actually, if you take that out enough decimal places, it will eventually register as an A. So I could just show you that real quick. Type math 89 point. Take it as far out as I can right there. It'll say you have an A. But for the most part, it's gonna register that as being less than 90. Cool, okay, so we've got our B's. Now we're just gonna essentially do the same thing for C's, D's, and F's. And F's will be a little different because it has a larger range. But a trick is here, all I need to do is just change that number right there, and then change this number to 70. And of course, change that letter to C. And I'm just gonna keep going for D's. So the last one's gonna be F's, and this is gonna be anything less than 60 and greater than or equal to 0. And that's gonna mean that we have an F in class. Now, so these conditions right here have every number covered between 0 and 100. So the last thing we want to check for is numbers that are outside of this range. So numbers that are less than 0 and greater than 100. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use my else statement. And the else statement is basically used to catch any numbers that are, or any conditions that are not already defined in these if and elif statements. So right here, I'm going to, and I don't need to actually put a condition because Python already knows that if it's not covered in these ranges right here, then it's going to be every other number. So I'm going to print something like, that's an invalid percentage. Please try again. So I will print that out. So let's go ahead and give this a test here. And we'll say maybe 73.5. Okay, we have a C, that works. Let's try a -6. That should be invalid. Let's try 100. Okay, so those are working there. Now, one thing that is still sort of missing is I keep needing to rerun my code in order to keep checking grades. And I can actually make this a lot easier by adding a loop to my program. And what I actually want to do is I just want to loop this block of code here. And I want to I just want to enter the name one time. So I really want to just loop everything else. Now there's a couple ways you can do a loop for this type of program. And the one I'll start with is called a while loop. And so a while loop is a loop that will repeat while a certain condition is being met. So I might do something like this. So I'm going to create one more variable, and I'm going to call this, I'm just going to call it end. And this is going to be a loop control variable. And what that means is the variable is going to control how many times it loops. And what I want to do is I just want to set end equal to 0. I'm going to set end equal to 0. And what I want to do is I want to say while end does not equal -1. And I'll explain in a second why I chose -1. But if you remember from scratch, we had a not operator. In Python, we use this symbol right here. It's an exclamation point and an equal sign. That means that something is not equal to something else. So if you look right here, end is currently 0, which means end does not equal -1. So that means that this statement is true. So now my loop's going to run as long as that statement does not change. You'll notice now, though, that I have this red line. So loops, just like if statements, need to be tabbed in so that they are sitting inside the while loop. So I'm going to go through and just tab everything over. And if I tab one thing, I need to tab everything over. So tab over all my elif statements. I've also got to tab in the statements below the elif statements. Like that. Now you'll notice, so let's go ahead and run this here. Okay, so, and then it asks me for another class. We'll say science. Okay, great. We'll say 92.4. Okay, and it keeps going. And so that is great. However, this is actually going to run forever at the moment because I have no way of changing the end variable. It's currently 0, and as long as it does not equal -1, it's going to keep running. So what I want to do is after my if, elif, and else statements, I want to add one more input, and I'm going to set that equal to this. I'm going to say end, and I'm going to say input. Please type 0 to continue or -1 to quit. And notice if you type the 0, 0 will get assigned to end, and end still does not equal -1, so the loop will keep going. However, if you type -1, this condition will no longer be true, and the loop will stop. However, remember, an input defaults to a string, so I actually just want to use a wrapper, and this time I'm going to use the int wrapper because int's a whole number, and -1's a whole number, so I'm just going to use that as my wrapper. So let's take a look. Let's just test it out. We'll say math again. We'll say 78.4. Have a C. Do you want to continue? I'll type -1, and you'll see that my program ends. And I'll just put a colon there instead and then a space, just so it looks a little better. I kind of want there to actually be maybe some space. Let's put some space where for the next time that we ask the question. So the next time that we ask, what's your grade, or sorry, what class are you checking your grade for? And I can actually do that. If I come up here to see where that question is, what class are you checking your grade for? Inside the quotation mark, I'm gonna put in some code that's referred to as an escape notation or an escape character. And what it is, there's a couple different ones. You can search for these online. You can see all the different escape characters, but you do a / and then a lowercase n. And what that's gonna do is it's just gonna give us a space. So let's see here, what class are you checking for? We'll say math, 9.4. Okay, you have a B in math. Let's just continue. And then you'll see that there is a little space there. So it just gives us a little space so that we can separate our entries here. So in a nutshell, that's the whole program right there. There are a couple different options that you can use to create your loop. There's another loop that is called it's basically an infinite loop, and we say while true. And we don't need that loop control variable there for this example, but we'll say while true, this loop is going to continue. And this is an infinite loop. So this is just going to run on forever and ever and ever. There's no way to stop it. However, what I could do is this. So we can say, we'll keep this notation right here. And inside this little section, I'm going to put another if statement. And I'm going to say if end equals, and I use the double equal sign because this is actually comparing values. If I just use one equal sign like I did here, that means I'm assigning a value to a variable. So here I want to say if end equals 0, we're going to use the keyword continue. That means the loop is going to go right back up to the top and start right here. And then what I can do is I'll come down here and I can say else, and I use the keyword break. And what break does is it breaks you out of the loop, and then it'll continue doing whatever code you've written down here. So right down here I might say, thank you, program now ending, like so. So let's give that a shot. What class is this for? We'll say math again. We'll say 78.4. Okay, you have a C, that works. Let's quit. And it says thank you, program ending. And maybe I'll put another little escape character there just to give us a little bit of space again. -1. Okay, so it is ending. Let's just make sure too that the 0 works. See if 0 works. Yep, and it'll let me keep going. So in a nutshell there's just two different ways to make your loops. And also we've got our if, elif, and else statements. So really so far that's sort of our first mini program in Python. Hope that works out for you. Be sure to go back, just pause the video if you need to go back and watch again. Pause it, follow along, and then start it up again. Otherwise, I will see you next time.